You ever notice how pain repeats itself? Different faces, same lesson. Different year, same wound dressed in new clothes. It's almost as if life keeps handing you the same script, waiting to see if you'll finally rewrite the ending. We call it bad luck. We call it heartbreak. We call it betrayal. But what if it's none of those things? What if it's you, caught inside a loop your soul refuses to graduate from? Because the truth is, you don't escape pain by running from it. You escape by learning what it came to teach you. And until you do, you'll meet it again and again and again. Psychology calls it repetition compulsion. Carl Jung called it the return of the repressed. But ancient mystics called it something simpler, karma. Different names for the same principle. You repeat what you don't understand. The unconscious mind does not forget what the conscious mind avoids. It waits patiently, creating situations that force you to confront yourself. It's not punishment, it's pedagogy. The soul teaches through recurrence. The number 4 symbolizes this exact process. The fourth stage, the fourth trial, the fourth wall you must break to see the truth that was hiding in plain sight. 4 appears everywhere. 4 seasons, 4 elements, 4 directions, 4 stages of transformation. Psychologically, 4 marks completion, but not escape. It's the point where the cycle can either renew or transcend. In Jungian symbolism, the quaternity represents the wholeness of the self. And until we integrate what we've denied, we're trapped in the loop, the cycle of self-betrayal. Imagine someone who keeps dating the same kind of person. The names change, the faces differ, but the pattern repeats. Every heartbreak feels new yet strangely familiar. They tell themselves, this time it's different. But deep down, they know it's not. Because what they're chasing isn't love, it's recognition, a subconscious attempt to heal a wound left long ago. Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And that's what this number symbolizes, the fate you keep meeting because you haven't met yourself. To repeat pain is to unknowingly worship it. You cling to the familiar because the familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. It's the paradox of the human psyche. We crave transformation, yet fear what it demands. The death of the old self. The cycle of pain isn't random. It's structured, like a circle drawn inside your soul. Each rotation brings you back to the same point, but slightly higher, slightly deeper. If you look closely, it's not a circle at all. It's a spiral. You revisit old wounds not to suffer again, but to suffer differently, to see what you couldn't before. Life doesn't repeat lessons because it's cruel. It repeats because it's compassionate. It's the universe whispering, you missed something. Look again. That's why the same betrayal, the same silence, the same disappointment, it all returns. Not to punish, but to awaken. Every pain you ignore accumulates interest, until one day it demands payment in tears, in breakdowns, in loss. And that's when you realize you were never a victim of others. You were a victim of your own unhealed patterns. So here lies the secret of the number 4. It's the moment you meet your pattern for the 4th time and realize it's no longer about them, it's about you. This is where the mirror turns inward. The shadow steps out of the dark, and the cycle starts to reveal its purpose. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into the meaning behind the shadow of 4, why the psyche repeats what it cannot resolve, and how facing it leads not to pain but to liberation. They say what you resist persists, but Jung went further. He said, what you ignore becomes your destiny. The shadow is not your enemy. It's the part of you that keeps knocking again and again in the form of pain. When Jung studied the unconscious, he saw something divine in its design. He realized that the psyche isn't chaotic, it's structured like nature itself. Everything moves in patterns, in circles, in stages of 4. Just like the four seasons mark the journey of life, the psyche moves through four symbolic phases: confrontation, chaos, clarity, and creation. And when a person refuses to move from one stage to the next, they remain trapped in a single season of the soul, endlessly winter. The number 4 to Jung represented wholeness. It was the union of opposites, light and dark, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious. In his mandalas, the sacred symbols of psychic integration, you'll always find 4 corners, 4 gates, 4 directions. Because the path to the self always leads through a crossroad, a place where the old and the new collide, and you are forced to choose, evolve, or repeat. Why does the unconscious repeat pain? Because it doesn't speak in words, it speaks in patterns. When you dream of drowning, it's not water, it's emotion. When you keep meeting cold people, it's not coincidence. It's the mirror of your own unacknowledged coldness. The universe doesn't punish, it reflects. Every pattern is a mirror, every wound is a message, and repetition is the psyche's way of saying, "You still don't see what I'm trying to show you." The shadow hides what we can't accept: anger, jealousy, shame, weakness, fear. We exile those parts of ourselves into the dark, believing that denial equals healing. But the psyche is not fooled. Whatever you suppress, it compensates for. It projects it outward. You start meeting your shadow through others. You'll see your repressed anger in the person who mistreats you. You'll see your suppressed weakness in the people you pity. You'll see your unacknowledged pride in those who make you jealous. And the more you deny, the louder the shadow speaks, until it finally screams through suffering. Let's break down the cycle of 4 that governs emotional transformation. Ignorance: you don't know what you don't know. You think pain is external, caused by the world. You blame others, and life feels unfair. Recognition: you start seeing the pattern. You notice that every situation has the same emotional flavor. The faces change, but the feeling doesn't. Resistance: you try to escape. You run, numb, distract, rationalize, but each attempt to avoid the lesson only makes it louder. Integration: you stop running. You face the pain. You realize it was never an enemy. It was the unhealed you. This is the quaternity Jung spoke of, the sacred fourfold journey of psychic evolution. And every time you refuse to complete it, you return to the beginning. That's why the same wounds keep showing up. They're not random, they're mathematical. They follow the geometry of your avoidance. You think pain is against you. But what if it's your teacher in disguise? What if the shadow's only purpose is to bring you back to yourself? Every emotion you reject becomes a ghost that haunts your decisions. It whispers through your choices, making you fall in love with what hurts you, trust what betrays you, and chase what abandons you. But the moment you turn and face it, the moment you name your shadow, it loses its grip. Because what is seen no longer needs to repeat. To face the shadow is to stop betraying yourself. To finally say, yes, this is me. The anger, the fear, the longing, the weakness, it's all mine, and I accept it. That's the 4th gate, acceptance. It's not a soft, romantic act. It's brutal honesty, the kind of honesty that burns through illusion and leaves only truth behind. Every person eventually reaches this crossroads. You stand between 2 roads. One leads back into the loop, the other into freedom. The first feels familiar but heavy. The second feels terrifying but alive. And most people choose the familiar because growth feels like death. The death of who you thought you were. The death of your excuses. The death of your stories. But if you listen closely, you'll notice something else in that death. A quiet rebirth. That's the essence of the number 4. Death and rebirth as one motion. Winter and spring united. Shadow and light reconciled. This is where the cycle becomes personal, where the mind stops theorizing and starts confessing, because every act of self-betrayal begins here, in the refusal to face your shadow. And that's what we explore next, the mirror of self-betrayal, where you'll see how your mind tricks you into protecting your pain, and how betrayal isn't something others do to you, it's something you keep doing to yourself. Every wound has two faces, the one that hurt you and the one that keeps reopening the cut. We blame the first. We never look at the second. That's the tragedy of human consciousness. We betray ourselves more quietly than anyone else ever could. To betray yourself doesn't mean lying or cheating. It means abandoning your inner truth for the sake of comfort, approval, or fear. It's saying yes when every cell in your body screams no. It's choosing peace over honesty and mistaking silence for strength. Self-betrayal is subtle. It hides behind politeness, loyalty, even love. You convince yourself you're being good, being kind, being forgiving. But deep down, you're not serving others. You're serving your own avoidance. Jung warned, the greatest sin is to be unconscious, because unconsciousness is what keeps the pattern alive. The moment you see yourself clearly, the illusion collapses. But most people don't want clarity. They want comfort. They want the pain to stop without learning its language. So they do what's easiest. They run back into the cycle, thinking this time they'll control it. But you can't control what you refuse to confront. The cycle of pain repeats because it's familiar. The psyche equates familiarity with safety. You'd rather suffer predictably than heal unpredictably. That's why you stay in the wrong relationships, chase people who don't see you, and silence your own needs. It's not weakness, it's programming. Your inner child learned that love was conditional, that to be accepted you had to shrink, behave, please, endure. So you internalized a simple rule. If I betray myself, maybe they'll stay. But here's the truth, you can't be loved for who you are if you're constantly pretending to be who you're not. And every time you repeat that pattern, you're not just reliving your past, you're protecting your wound. Self-betrayal becomes a ritual of fear. You repeat it until it feels holy. You convince yourself you're being humble, patient, selfless. But humility without boundaries is self-erasure. Patience without self-respect is self-destruction, and love without honesty is self-punishment. In Jungian terms, self-betrayal is the ego's defense mechanism against the chaos of truth. The ego says, if I stay the same, I'll survive. But the self whispers, if you stay the same, you'll never live. This inner war creates the loop of four. Pain, you feel the wound again. A trigger, a rejection, a failure. Projection, you blame the world, finding someone to carry the pain for you. Suppression, you deny your feelings, convincing yourself you're fine. Repetition, you recreate the same situation to try again, without changing anything within. And so it spins, like the four turning wheels of karma, until one day the weight of avoidance becomes unbearable. That's when breakdown happens, when the soul revolts against your lies. The breakdown is not the end. It's the beginning of consciousness. It's the psyche demanding honesty. You can't lie to yourself forever without consequence. Your body will tell the truth through fatigue. Your relationships will tell the truth through conflict. Your silence will tell the truth through emptiness. Every repeated pain is a message from the self. Stop betraying me. Nietzsche understood this cycle well. He called it eternal recurrence, the idea that your life will repeat endlessly until you live it consciously enough to accept it. He asked a question that still burns through time. What if you had to live this exact life again and again? Every joy, every failure, every heartbreak. Would you bless it or curse it? That's not philosophy. That's self-confrontation. Because to bless your pain, you must first own it. You must stop treating suffering as an enemy and start treating it as the sculptor of your soul. Self-betrayal ends not when life gets easier, but when you become strong enough to stay true even when it hurts. That's Nietzsche's Amor Fati, the love of one's fate. It's the moment you stop saying, "Why me?" and start saying, "Yes, this too is me." It's brutal, it's transformative, and it's the only way out of the loop. Stand in front of a mirror for a moment, not to fix your hair or your flaws, but to look into your own eyes. Truly look. Ask yourself, how many times have I said yes when I meant no? How many times have I silenced myself just to be loved? How many times have I called betrayal forgiveness and self-erasure compassion? This is not about guilt. It's about recognition. Because once you recognize the mirror, you can no longer pretend it's someone else's reflection. You see that every person who hurt you was showing you where you abandon yourself. You see that every rejection was an invitation to self-respect, and you realize it was never about them. It was always about you. There comes a point when awareness becomes unbearable. You can't unsee what you've seen. That's when transformation begins. To break the mirror of self-betrayal, you must do what the ego fears most. Choose yourself, not as a selfish act, but as a sacred one. Because when you choose yourself, you stop expecting others to carry your worth. You stop begging life to love you, and you start living in a way that deserves love. This is where pain turns into power. Because betrayal taught you what loyalty means. Abandonment taught you what presence feels like. And silence taught you what truth sounds like. Everything you thought was destroying you was actually defining you. Now the pattern becomes clear. Pain was the teacher, the shadow was the classroom, and your soul was the student, repeating the same grade until you finally learned the lesson. But what happens when you do learn? When you stop running, stop blaming, and start transforming? That's when the story enters its next phase. The awakening through pain, where Nietzsche's Amor Fati becomes real and you discover that suffering, when embraced, is not punishment, it's purification. Pain is not the opposite of awakening, it is the awakening. Every collapse, every heartbreak, every loss, it's not the end of your life, it's your life trying to begin. You've been taught to avoid suffering, to run when it hurts, to distract, to numb, to call it moving on. But moving on without understanding is just wandering in circles. The psyche doesn't heal through avoidance, it heals through exposure. Just as fire purifies metal, pain burns away illusion. Jung called this the path of individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. He wrote that no one becomes illuminated by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To awaken through pain means to stop asking for escape and start asking for meaning. It's not, "Why did this happen to me?" but "What in me needed to see this?" That's when pain becomes sacred, because pain, when faced, ceases to be punishment. It becomes participation, participation in your own becoming. Transformation is not gentle. It begins with death. Not physical death, but psychological death. The death of illusions, attachments, identities. You lose who you thought you were. The masks start falling off. The roles you played, pleaser, savior, victim, stop fitting. You no longer find comfort in what once felt safe, and you begin to grieve. This grief is the soul's labor pain. It's the tearing of old skin so the new one can breathe. But most people mistake this death for failure. They don't realize it's resurrection in disguise. Nietzsche understood this perfectly. He said, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." That chaos, the disintegration of the false self, is the crucible of authenticity. When you no longer betray yourself, you also no longer belong to your old world. You start seeing truth everywhere, in endings, in solitude, in silence, and though it hurts, there's a strange beauty to it. The beauty of being real for the first time. To awaken through pain is to practice amor fati, the love of fate, not tolerance, not resignation, but love. Nietzsche didn't mean a naive acceptance of suffering. He meant a radical yes to existence itself. He meant the courage to see that even the darkest moments belong to the same divine order as your joy. When you love your fate, you stop dividing life into good and bad. You stop labeling experiences as blessings or curses. You begin to see everything as necessary, as if each moment were designed precisely to carve your soul into shape. It's easy to love what feels good, but Amor Fati asks you to love what broke you, to bless the pain that taught you, to thank the endings that awakened you, to embrace the nights that shaped your dawn, because without them, you would have stayed asleep. Suffering is alchemical. It transforms base emotion into wisdom, fear into courage, grief into depth, loneliness into intimacy with yourself. When you resist pain, it stays pain. When you face it, it becomes understanding. When you accept it, it becomes power. Every scar is proof that the soul knows how to rebuild. Every heartbreak is evidence that you are capable of love. Every failure is a rehearsal for mastery. And this is what the number 4 represents in its highest form. Not the loop, but the ladder. Not the cycle, but the spiral. Because when you learn from your pain, you don't escape the circle. You transcend it. There's a moment when you stop asking, "When will this end?" and instead whisper, "What is this teaching me?" That's the moment consciousness enters suffering, and everything changes, because consciousness doesn't stop pain. It redeems it. It gives it direction. It turns victimhood into vision. Nietzsche said that one who has a why can bear almost any how. Meaning doesn't remove suffering. It dignifies it. It gives it form, purpose, weight. It makes you able to endure the unbearable and still remain human. To awaken through pain is to rebel against numbness. It's to refuse the shallow comfort of avoidance. To say, "I will not distract myself from my own becoming." It's a silent revolution of the soul. No applause, no validation, no guarantee. Just you, walking through the fire and trusting that you'll come out clearer. Jung once wrote that the greatest privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege costs everything false. You lose illusions, relationships, identities. Yet in their ashes, you find something indestructible, yourself. That's the paradox of awakening. You burn and you are reborn as light. And one day, something small happens. You react differently. You pause where you used to explode. You let go where you used to cling. You choose silence instead of proving your worth. And in that quiet shift, you realize you've learned the lesson. That's what healing really looks like. Not perfection, but awareness. Not a life without pain, but a life where pain no longer owns you. You start to see the divine order behind your chaos. You start to understand that every repetition was a lesson plan, and that nothing was wasted, not even the worst moments, because all along life wasn't punishing you, it was initiating you. And that brings us to the final chapter, the fourth door, integration and freedom. This is where the cycle ends, where you no longer chase or run from pain, but integrate it into your being, where you understand that healing isn't the absence of suffering, it's the mastery of meaning. You've walked through the repetition, you've met your shadow, you've faced your self-betrayal, you've awakened through the fire. Now it's time to cross the final threshold, to live consciously, to complete the number 4, and to become whole. Most people think freedom is escape, but real freedom is return. Not returning to your old self, but to the self that existed before you learned to hide. Freedom is not the absence of pain, it's the presence of understanding. The number 4 has always symbolized completion. 4 directions, 4 elements, 4 phases of the moon. But spiritually, it's more than structure. It's integration. The moment when opposites cease to fight and begin to coexist. You can think of the 4th door as the end of a labyrinth. Every corridor you walked, every betrayal, heartbreak, loneliness, confusion, was not a punishment, but a path. Each turn led you inward toward the center of your being. When you finally reached the 4th door, you realized there was never a way out, only a way through, because the labyrinth was never around you, it was you. Integration doesn't mean perfection, it means wholeness. It's the moment when your shadow and your light no longer compete for control, but learn to coexist in balance. You stop dividing yourself into good and bad. You stop rejecting parts of you that were only ever misunderstood. Your fear, your anger, your jealousy, your grief. They're not enemies anymore. They're teachers. They're pieces of you returning home. Carl Jung called this the union of opposites. He believed that true healing happens not when we eliminate the darkness, but when we make peace with it. And that's what the 4th door is. The peace after the storm. The stillness after the burning. The realization that you are not broken. You were becoming whole. Look closely at nature. Everything moves in 4s. 4 seasons: birth, growth, decay, rebirth. 4 elements: fire, air, water, earth. 4 chambers of the heart. 4 stages of the moon. Why? Because the psyche mirrors the universe. It evolves through symmetry, balance, and completion. And when you align with this pattern, when you stop resisting the rhythm of transformation, you feel harmony again. You realize that life was never linear. It's circular, spiral, alive, and that every ending you mourned was simply one part of the circle completing itself. When you understand the cycle, it stops being repetition and becomes rhythm. Before, you were trapped in your patterns unconsciously. Now you move through them consciously. The difference is awareness. Awareness turns pain into poetry. Awareness turns fear into wisdom. Awareness turns fate into choice. This is how karma dissolves, not by escaping it, but by understanding it. Because the moment you learn the lesson, you no longer need the suffering to teach it. The same situation might appear again, but it feels different. You respond differently. You no longer lose yourself. You no longer repeat the old self-betrayal. That's the sign you've walked through the 4th door. When you finally stop fighting yourself, something extraordinary happens. You feel quiet. Not the empty kind of quiet, but the sacred kind. The quiet that comes after tears. The quiet of acceptance. You begin to see life not as an enemy to survive, but as a mystery to experience. You stop chasing meaning and start embodying it. You stop trying to prove your worth and start living from it. Integration feels like coming home to a house you didn't know was yours. Every part of you that you rejected is there waiting. The child, the shadow, the dreamer, the rebel. And they all look at you and whisper, "We never left. We were just waiting for you to remember freedom isn't the absence of chains. It's realizing you were never chained, that what held you was not the world, but your perception of it. You see now that every repetition was not a punishment from life. It was an invitation from the self. You weren't cursed, you were being carved. The sculptor was pain and the statue was you. You see that the shadow wasn't darkness, it was depth. That heartbreak wasn't rejection, it was redirection. That betrayal wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. Every wound that once bled now glows, because it's no longer just pain, it's meaning. It's proof that you've lived, that you've learned, that you've become. This is freedom, not a life without storms, but the ability to stand in the rain and say, I am not afraid anymore. And that's the power of the number 4. It begins as repetition but ends as revelation. It starts as pain but becomes purpose. It starts as betrayal but ends as belonging. The first time you fall, you blame the world. The second, you blame others. The third, you blame yourself. The fourth, you understand. And understanding breaks the chain. The number 4 is the moment you see the pattern and choose differently. It's the sacred pause between reaction and realization. It's the threshold between fate and freedom. You no longer need the lesson because you are the lesson. Let's look back. The pattern you cannot escape. Where it all begins. Unconscious repetition. The shadow of 4. Where the truth hides beneath projection. The mirror of self-betrayal. Where the pain turns inward, demanding honesty. The awakening through pain. Where suffering becomes consciousness. The fourth door. Integration and freedom. Where the circle closes and the soul becomes whole. That's the full cycle, the eternal rhythm of growth, the dance of the psyche, the geometry of awakening. Every one of us will walk through these 4 doors again and again until we remember who's been walking all along. So if you find yourself repeating the same pain, don't curse the pattern. Study it, because what you call bad luck is often your soul trying to get your attention. Sit with the discomfort. Listen to the echoes. Ask your pain what it wants to teach you. And when you finally understand, don't run from it. Bow to it, thank it, and walk through it as one who no longer fears the fire but has learned to glow from it. Because that's what the number 4 is really about. Not the end of pain, but the end of unconscious pain. You've learned the lesson, you've seen the shadow, you've forgiven yourself. Now step forward, not as who you were, but as who you've become, whole, aware, free,